Now, take a look at what happens during this worship service. It says, seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. Now, friends, you got to love Luke here, right? I mean, he is just telling it like it is. Like, hey, Paul was going late. He was preaching past midnight. It was just going on and on. And in fact, he was talking for so long that this poor teenager named Eutychus, he started to fall into a deep sleep. In other words, he was falling asleep during the sermon. Now, friends, just by a show of hands this morning, how many of you have fallen asleep during a sermon before? I appreciate your honesty. There should be more of you raising your hand because I've seen you sleeping before. Or how about this? How many of you know somebody who's fallen asleep during a sermon before? How many of you would say that person is sitting next to you this morning, yeah? I remember one time about 6 or 7 years ago, I was preaching up at what used to be our East Bay campus in Clearwater. And there was this lady, she was about 4 or 5 rows back, and I noticed her because about, a couple minutes into the sermon, her eyes started to droop. They were just kind of doing this. And a few minutes later, I looked over her way, and she started to bob. Friends, you know it's bad. You are out cold when your head is bobbing, right? And so here she is, she's going. I'm like, all right, we're just going to check on that. Well, a couple minutes later, all of a sudden, I heard this noise. Now, friends, this was not a big church. If you've ever been to the East Bay before, this was a small church, like 75 to 100 people, so everybody in the room can hear it. In fact, some of you were there that day, and you probably remember this very incident. And it was crazy because here I am, I'm trying to preach, but I'm getting distracted. I don't even know what I'm talking about because the whole time. And friends, it got to this weird moment. It had been going on for probably a solid minute where everybody was looking at me, and I was looking at them like, Chris, are you going to do something, or should we do something? And finally, you know what I did? I don't remember exactly what I was preaching about in that moment, but I do remember that I started to talk louder and louder and louder and louder, and then I clapped for emphasis. I didn't need to. And all of a sudden, she woke up. And she kind of looked around and pretended like she had been awake the whole time, But everybody else, and I mean everybody, we all knew what had happened that day. Now, friends, here at Our Savior, we are not going to fault you if you fall asleep during one of our sermons. And the reason is because we are asking you to hang with us for like 20 to 25 minutes as we go on and on and on, right? When in reality, actually, the research shows us that the average attention span of an adult is 15 seconds. In fact, when TikTok started their company, that's what they limited their videos to originally, was 15 seconds. They were following the research because they realized that adults can't pay attention longer than 15 seconds before they start to space out and think about something else.